Hello, thank you for joining us as we top of the hour, 1 p.m. Eastern time here for the 2021 Consumer Research Report, part one of a four-part educational series that we've put together with sports marketing surveys and HPS and our friend Jay Townley here to guide us through. Today's presentation is the most significant findings from the report for bicycle retailers. This consumer research report has given us great intel into who the customer is, what they plan to purchase, and from where. Looking at the report, it goes deep into both traditional and e-bikes, price points, brand awareness, the reasons behind recreation, and why these new cyclists have come to choose our sport. I can tell you firsthand that the data in this report is enlightening. And I urge you to come to the 3 webinars that will follow today's, and also to grab a copy of the report to use for your planning and forecasting for the future. It's been my great pleasure to work alongside Jay Townley and Sports Marketing Surveys to bring this data to our industry, data that will truly help us as we continue to pivot forward. And with this, we'll turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Heather. And at the end of the session, Rochelle is going to monitor questions as they come in. At the end of the session, I'm going to allow as much time as I can for questions, but any questions that we don't get to, Rochelle is going to send to me, and I'll make sure that I respond to them by phone or email. So every question will get answered. Also, relative to the education series, it's extremely important for retailers, particularly those that are purchasing the report. So this first one, the NBDA has made absolutely sure that the January 19th, this webinar is open to everybody, whether you're a member or not. So you get the flavor of what we've got here as far as the consumer research report, the value to both the supply side and also to the retailers. The January 26th and February 2nd webinars will be for the purchasers, for NBDA members and the purchasers of the research only. And February 16th is a roundtable that will be for the NBDA members and purchasers of the research. And it'll be a roundtable with a guest, Keith Storey, who is the practitioner, the research practitioner from Sports Market Surveys. He's also president of that company. And so we'll have a panel made up of experts to both answer questions and also delve into a few of the details in the study, which we're going to cover for retailers in this particular session. I'm going to take my video and back off here as we begin to get into the webinar series, but want to point out, it'll take me a second here to catch up and make sure that we get to the next slide while I'm waiting for that. The webinar today is for bike shops. It's for retailers. And I bring that up and mention it because it's important that the suppliers and the sponsors who are attending this session, there we go, now we've got control, who are attending this session understand that what we've done for retailers is to take this very large, expansive study and try to boil it down and do the work that the companies will do internally with their marketing and senior management. And we've done that for retailers so that we've presented to retailers both strategic and tactical advice and recommendations based on the findings of the research. We do not do this for suppliers because suppliers have available to them 150 pages of material. And for retailers, what we're doing is going through and summarizing that. And one of the reasons for the roundtable is the last session on February 16th of this 4-part educational series is to make sure that retailers have opportunities to go through the report, to list and ask their questions. The other thing that's popping up is several of the suppliers have come back and said that some of their young people, particularly in the product management sides, are kind of looking at the research and saying, nah, that can't be. This is expensive research. It's extensive. And for the supply side, and this includes the sponsors, you have to thin slice, because this is the voice of every cycling consumer in the United States. And you have to, and by the way, it's the people that came to cycling, the adults that came to cycling and rode a bicycle in 2020 and 2021, the 2 years of the pandemic, the last 24 months. So the enormity of this study, the size of this study, the scope of it really means you got to sit down and work through it and read it, break it up into pieces and look at it over a period of time, and then talk to others in your companies about it. Off the top impressions of something you see that's attributable to a consumer that's not in your sphere of influence, you have to recognize that and understand that that's the voice of a consumer that's buying a bicycle and using a bicycle from some other source. Could be somebody that bought a bike used. So before you look at it and say, stop very carefully and attach this research to your voice of your customer. Look at what your company is doing, how your brand fares in the brand research side. So with that said, this is for retailers, and the agenda for today is an introduction, which I've already started, but we'll do an introduction of the research as well. We'll look at the methodology for those of you that are into research or have heard things about research, to make sure at least you're aware of the methodology. This can be delved into whatever detail you wish to. Demographics. The dealer version of this study, the NBDA bicycle shop version, is heavy on the demographic side, although the study does have in-depth demographics in detail. This is one of the things we feel that's important for dealers to have a handle on. It's also a way of helping summarize for specialty bike retailers. Product categories, just finished. This is part of the latest supplier report. It's called the brand study that just came out day before yesterday from Sports Market Surveys. It finishes the research package. So we haven't delved into the detail. We will in the next couple of days and add this to the NBDA bike shop version of the research study. And for the dealers that purchased previously, as soon as this came out, there will be a version 2, so you will get a supplement with all the additional material on these product categories. Segmentation is extremely important, particularly for crafting marketing plans, not only to hold on to markets that you have, but also looking at the markets that you want to move into and tap into, and also the shift in the markets, so that you can move your brand with the shift if the demographics fit, and it's the market that you're going to go after in those market segments that you feel that your product is best suited to. We're going to briefly go back to the educational series schedule just to make sure that it's clear, because this is the first in a 4-part series. We'll do a quick summary and then open up for question and answer. So the introduction. Key study insights. This is extensive because the key study insights are. And so for all participants, for all purchasers of all types of reports at all levels, what are the key cyclist segments in today's market? Extremely important. How do these segments buy? How do they interact with IBDs? How have buying channels changed? What channels are the most important for each segment? How have bicycle buying habits changed? And they have. Will the changes be long? That's interesting. That's part of what this study begins to delve into and determine. How can we take advantage of the changes? Also a key issue. Is the new cyclist segment significant? Are the cyclists that came to cycling as new cycling participants in the last 2 years, and those that came back to cycling after having dropped out for a period of time and came back to cycling during the pandemic, are they significant? How big are these returning and the new cyclists? What is the long-term potential? What are the most important buying factors in each segment? And those, by the way, along with the market has changed. The consumers changed during the pandemic. We now know what the buying habits are, and so how you can perform in order to reach the current mindset and the current attributes, the current values of the consumer. And how does your brand, in the case of the bicycle brands, perform in each segment? And I was talking to Heather about this yesterday. Bike shops have to really clearly focus on the fact and hone in on the fact that their shop is the brand in their local neighborhood and community. Their bike shop is the brand. So this isn't just for the bicycle brands, forgive me, bicycle brands for saying this, but brand performance in each segment is clearly something that bike shops need to be cognizant of and aware of as well. And lastly, what message resonates with each segment of adult cyclists, and how do you reach them? Now, as a part of the introduction, we agreed that we wanted to briefly cover what the reports are that are available from the NBDA from this research. To the far right, and I could use my cursor here, is the sponsors report. Sponsors have already received their report. It's inclusive. It includes everything that is included in the supplier report, which is in the middle, but has, in addition to that, the Excel files, and there are two of them, two huge Excel files with the survey data itself. Now, that is because these were sponsors. They stepped up early and they allowed this study to move forward because of the financial contribution they made through their sponsorship. The brand report is available in two price ranges. This is a $5,000 report for the brands in the industry or interested parties, the investment houses, the SPACs, the larger companies that look at investment in the bike community, and $4,500 for the same report for NBDA associate members. The associate members are the brands and service providers like Human Powered Solutions that have joined as associate members of the dealer association. And then to the far left is the NBDA member report. This is the retailer report. There is a price. This is $399. As I said, it's a $399 report, but what we've done is condensed and consolidated. So it doesn't have the database. It doesn't have all of the detail. It doesn't have what the brands or the suppliers need for their analysis or to use with their marketing people or with their advisors or their agencies. We boil that down and summarize it for the dealer in a much smaller report, but it does get into the segmentation. It looks at the purchase behavior, the importance of buying, all the factors that go into the reasons to buy or the path to purchase, and future buying intentions. And we'll cover that in more detail as we go through this webinar, which focuses again on retail members. What I want to point out here is that there is an NBDA member price for NBDA retailers, and there's also a retailer price. So any specialty retailer can buy this report. However, it's $699 if you're a non-member. So there's a huge savings just to join the NBDA relative to this report and also all the other benefits, which Rochelle would be more than happy to explain to you. You can find on the NBDA website, nbda.com. The methodology briefly, and I tightened this up. There were 2,500 what's referred to as interviews. These were online surveys with adult cyclists in the USA. Now, again, the 2,500 are adults who own and ride a bicycle. And that was over the 2020-2021 period, the period of the COVID. It's a national representation of adult cyclists, both acoustic and electric bike riders. And the electric bike piece is, for the future, extremely important. All the demographics are there by age, gender, income, by region, more than I can cover in today's session. And then we just point out that the field work was completed in November of 2021. This is current consumer primary research. There's more to the methodology contained in the reports. One of the pieces that dealers and suppliers alike will ask is, what is the confidence interval? And this sample of 2,000 has a confidence interval of up to plus minus 2 percentage points. The explanation is shown here. There's a longer explanation posted in the research itself. And of course, for the last of the sessions in this webinar series, you'll be able to ask Keith Storey himself about the conference interval and all the detail of it. Remember, that will be on the roundtable discussion February 16th after the next two sessions. Demographics. This is one of my favorite topics. Some of you may know this. What is the definition of demographics? Demographics, which is plural, are the statistical characteristics of human populations, such as age, gender, income, ethnicity, and education attainment, used to identify a market or a segment of a market by its demographics. And how those characteristics, how those demographic characteristics compare to the characteristics of the whole country. And that becomes extremely important in the detail analysis and how you use this consumer research study for your own individual marketing plans and for bike shop strategic marketing and for bike shop business planning. Now, I also would point out I'm one of the few people in the industry that really likes demographics, which has been equated in the marketing world as watching paint dry. And we don't need to go into the detail. I try to make it more exciting than that because I think it is. Now, here's the overview. The overview demographics from this study is there are more male cyclists than female. We'll delve into the detail of that and why that's not necessarily a good thing in our view. 48.2% of cyclists were between the ages of 25 and 44. That falls right into what we'll refer to as the sweet spot. And make sure that you're aware of where the ages fit together and where the age groups are. The average age of a cyclist in 2021, 42. Half of the cyclists have a household income of over $75,000 a year, meaning that the typical cyclist skews above the average to higher incomes. Most cyclists live in the South Atlantic region, while New England has the fewest. Now, geography is one of the pieces that takes time and effort here, and we've provided the means in the dealer study through an addendum, and we'll show you how we do that using census data, so dealers can figure out what state or how their state fits into the regions and the districts relative to this research, by the way. 53.2% of cyclists have college or graduate degrees. National average is in the 30s, as you'll see when we get into the detail. This means that the typical cyclist is college educated or has a graduate degree. And then lastly, most cyclists are Caucasian. Caucasians, as you'll see, over-index, and that leaves a great deal of the population that is also potential customers for bicycles and bicycling. But this is an overview of the demographics. The detail that we put into the NBDA Bike Shop report includes tables like this. Now, I haven't included all of them because I don't want to live up to the axiom that demographics is like watching paint dry. I'd like to make it a little more exciting for you from the standpoint of individual planning. But this is table one from the demographics section. It looks at the percent of adult bicycle and e-bike riders in 2020 and 2021 versus the percent US population with the variance. Now that's a mouthful, but what it boils down to is this. Using my cursor, these are male, female, percent of adult bicycle and e-bike riders over the last 2 years, the period of the pandemic. Males were 56.8%. of the respondents to this study. Females, 42.6. The national population percentage is 48.9 male, 51.1 female. The end result is that males over-index here by 7.9%, almost 8 percentage points, while females correspondingly under index by 8.5%. Now, again, I said this is not necessarily good. We know who our customer is. We know that they're predominantly male. This, by the way, has been the case for several decades. relative to bicycles and bicycling. But there's a very large female population that is in the United States at 51.1% that is underrepresented, undersold, and is a great opportunity. And the reasons for that are not only contained in the study and the detail of the study, but are things that we need to discuss and we need to build into strategy and tactic going forward. Now, again, we focus on specialty bike retailers. I'll just point out that this is something that the suppliers, particularly the brands, should be looking at very carefully going forward. So what we do in the material we put together for bike shops relative to how to use the demographics in this research study is we put a suggested strategy together. For the population, we suggest that they research and see brands that demonstrate a real commitment to attract male and female customers through product development and offerings and merchandising support to bike shops. So from a brand standpoint, you can take a look at this and say, is this something that you should be looking at and thinking about relative to how you take your brand to market? Relative to dealers, we're saying, hey, dealers really look for brands that demonstrate a real commitment to attracting both male and female customers. We're also cautioning and saying, look, hey, be careful, bike shops, of brands that are gender washing or socially incorrect or offending female consumers. This is not just us. This is not just what the sports market surveys is saying in the survey, what Human Powered Solutions is saying in our analysis, or the NBDA is saying to members. This is basically sociological. It's what's occurring in the country today. So we're following what is really good advice relative to over-indexing males is fine. Under-indexing females is something you have to work really hard at developing your strategies and your tactics for. Work hard on balancing the hiring for a staff that's equally representative by gender, age, and the racial makeup of your neighborhood and your regional market. Make a commitment to gender equality and continually educate your staff to treat both men and women with equal respect, and make it a clear policy that you'll not tolerate any disrespect for any shopper or visitor. Without going into more detail, I can tell you that past research plus current research shows that one of the problems that bike shops have with attracting more women is the fact that staff disrespects women in many, many ways. Women don't like going into bike shops. So tune your omni-channel merchandising, your online presence, and your social presence by balancing your gender representation and responses. And seriously consider training and appointing a woman to be the official greeter for your bike shop. Now, I have gone into detail on this in years. I won't for this session because of time, but I do think this is a very serious consideration. Now, we're moving along here to the percent adult bicycle riders with the percent of US, compared to the US percent of US population. This is age groups. Age groups is something that, again, from a retail standpoint, is more in the planning. You serve with respect and with the absolutely same service levels. Every customer, no matter what age, walks into your store, no matter what generation they're from. But relative to the percent adult bicycle and e-bike riders during the pandemic that are now presented to us in 2022, you can see to the far right here, first of all, the percentages that we got from the study, with an average age of 42, as we mentioned, percent US population with an average age of 38.5, and then the variances representing the percent or the index. And the over-index, the biggest over-index is 35 to 44, where there were almost 25% of the adult and e-bike riders in the last 2 years, compared to 12.8% of the US population, almost 25% compared to 13%, or over-indexing by 12%. Now, that is not necessarily bad, but from the standpoint of under-indexing, 65 plus, the aging baby boomer, who had been the mainstay age group of the cycling community, came in 60.3% of riders of bikes and even e-bikes over the last 2 years, from 17%, 16.9% of the US population, under indexing by 10%. Now, again, this is something that you need to look at and be concerned about relative to bringing these consumers in. But as you'll see a little later in the presentation, they also are very low from the standpoint of amount spent or the spend annually on bicycles and bicycling gear. So again, you do this with a certain degree of making sure that you're looking for the sweet spot in the market. This is well worth looking at just from the standpoint of understanding clearly these differences and also the indexes, where the reality of bike riders in the last 2 years over-index in the 35 to 44 and the 25 to 34 age groups, the 12% and the 9.4%. The strategies here is the average age of an adult cyclist skews older at 42, as we point out. And while leaning toward the future in the form of the younger 25 to 34 age group, we've got to also be very cognizant that 25 to 34 is a very important group coming up. And we'll show this when we get into the generational definitions for you. Your store merchandising plan, and I hope every specialty bike retailer, in addition to having a business plan, has a store merchandising plan as a part of that, needs to address the demographics of your neighborhood and your local market, which means you may have to stock merchandise that is aimed at 2 or 3 age segments, including e-bikes. Your omni-channel merchandising is also important. I'll keep returning to this. Your omni-channel merchandising. That means that your commerce-enabled website, which is a necessity today for specialty bike retailers, is extremely important here because younger and older shoppers will judge your retail brand on their first impressions upon visiting your commerce-enabled website and your social media presence. Now, I realize bandwidth is an issue. You don't have a lot of time, but as you staff and you go through the way you recruit, hire, and train, is look for staff that are very conversant with and familiar with the web, and that can, and social media, and that can work with you to be your bandwidth representatives on your social media sites. And do not get into more social media presence than what you can provide really good response from your staff and up-to-date postings and up-to-date information on your website. The tactics here is staff for gender and ethnicity. But keep age in mind to make 65 plus female shoppers welcome and comfortable in your shop, along with 25-year-old returning customers. And remember, the millennial generation, ages 24 to 39, are extremely important to you. And here's one of the reasons. The millennial generation, ages 24 to 39 in this country, are 8 to 9% likely to want to drive a car. They'll want micro-mobility. They want to ride a bicycle, whether they rent it, whether they own it, or whether it is a shared means of mobility for them. They are 8 to 9% right now less likely to want to drive a car and to ride the product you sell. Now, these are the 6 living generations of Americans by birth years, age, and resident population in millions. And I'm bringing this up quickly because it matches, it's in the materials that we provide to dealers. Brands probably have this and work with it, but for dealers, we want to be sure that they've got it available to them. And the key issue with looking at this is really, if I can get my cursor to work here, the millennial generation and Gen X, which are the 2 generations that fall between 24 and 55 years of age. 24 and 55 years of age. The millennial generation, Generation X. Let's move right into the sweet spot, or the strategic piece of this discussion. The sweet spot is a demographic term. It's used to identify the age group that represents the greatest potential. The millennial generation, born between 1981 and 1996, And as I said, it's currently 24 to 39 years of age. It's also the largest generation of Americans with 72.26 million residents. Now, the Millennial Generation also embraces the 24 to 34 age group and half of the 35 to 44 age groups that are identified as the largest segments of adult bicycle and e-bike riders during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. Now, they are, or you could refer to them as, the sweet spot for the specialty bike retail business and for the bicycle business in general. Now, I apologize for zooming through this, but there's a lot of material that I want to get to, and I want to make sure that we stay within the time frame for this webinar. So this, we're jumping a few tables now, and this takes us to average income, which is extremely important. This percent of adult and e-bike riders from 2020 to 2021 compared to the percent of the US population. Let's move right down to the bottom to the mean, or the C average. Mean, average are the same thing. For the study in the last 2 years, the mean or average income was $88,960, almost $89,000. Extremely high when you look at the US population, where the mean is $63.2 thousand per year. This over-indexes by $25,000. So from the standpoint of a generalization, cyclists skew upper income. And if you look at the 100,000 plus incomes, at 37% of cyclists, bicycle riders, and e-bike riders in 2020, 2021, that's 37% as compared to 30% of the US population, an over-index of 6.5%. It's the biggest over-index within the income structures. Although, if you look between 25,000 and 74,000 or 75,000, 25 and 75,000 per year, the cycling community under indexes the US population slightly, not a big amount. But the big news here is the upper income piece, which is good, but in turn it's holding on to those customers. So the suggested strategies is keep merchandising, advertising, and promotions focused on the upscale shopper and on that media that they go to and that reaches them. And in turn, consider a portion of the online and social media coverage that you've got, that you direct that toward your younger and lower income segments at the same time. Part of that being the reason that it's those younger segments that aren't going to drive as much by choice. So therefore, they become a very potentially great market for our products, with 8 or 9% of them not wanting to drive a car as they get older. So investigate the circular economy as well. Now, this is the used economy. A lot of people turn their nose up at this, but it's become extremely clear and popular, particularly during the pandemic, that the circular economy of previously owned and used bicycles in particular, and gear, are becoming more frequented, more popular. They are certainly environmentally friendly. And so that the used segment is important to you from the standpoint of how do you represent it on your website? How do you work with the representative systems or providers, the Pros Closet, the Bike Exchange? How are you interfacing with them, incorporating them, or integrating them into your website and also your social media, so that you do represent the circular economy at the same time you're representing the new bike and the new e-bike categories, and making sure you merchandise and advertise accordingly. For tactics, we represent investigating affiliations with platforms like Bike Exchange, and I mentioned Pros Closet, and take a look at a guaranteed trade-in policy for new merchandise sales. Some retailers, brick and mortar retailers and direct-to-consumer retailers, are doing quite well with this policy, where you buy a bike from the retailer and there's a guaranteed trade-in and a trade-in value in some cases attached to that category. Now, this is the geographic piece, and I'm not going to go into this in any detail at all, except to point out that in the NBDA Bike Shop study and report that is available to NBDA members and to non-member retailers, we look at these census divisions in detail This chart shows the index and the U.S. population and the variances or the under overages. They're too numerous to go through here. We do cover it in detail. We also provide, as I said, an addendum so that retailers can take a look at the state they're in relative to both the division and also the regions, and they can look at where the overage or the underage in the variance or the sales penetrations would affect them. Our strategies are clear relative to anything relative to the geography. Advocate for bicycles and e-bikes in your neighborhood. Advocate in your community. Advocate in the county and the state. Join the League of American Bicyclists and be their local state chapter or affiliate organization, and open your store as a meeting place for advocacy groups and organizations, and post advocacy messages on your website and in your social media. Become a part, if you're not, many dealers are, but many dealers are also are not. And you should become a part of the advocacy organizations and drive and movement, so that you in turn are representing that to your state and to the demographics in your state and to all of the representatives or the community representatives that in turn could become advocates for you and also clients for you to ride your products. The tactics are very simple and provide space in your store for posting advocacy notices, schedules, etc. Make sure that you're giving your shop the aura of being a place where the public can come and get information about advocacy for bicycles, for bicycling, for e-bikes, and for micro-mobility in general in your community. Ethnicity. Now, this is something again, can work to your advantage, developing a plan. Remember, this is aimed at retailers. So for especially bike retailers, we repeated several times that you need to also staff for ethnicity. But what ethnicity shows that the percentage of bike and e-bike riders in 2020 and 2021 over-indexed at 78.7% of all respondents, above the 60% US population, over-indexed by almost 18%. Now, interestingly to me, African Americans at 13.2% of representation in the study and 12.2% of US population also over-indexed, only by 1%, but still these are the two ethnic groups in the United States by race that over-indexed for representation as bicycle riders in the United States in the last 2 years. The big underrepresentation is Hispanic and Latino, which is a growing portion of the population. It's higher from the standpoint of population right now than the African-American portion of the population, and yet under indexes among bicycle and e-bike riders at almost 10%, 9.1, well, 9%, 9.1%. So this we cover in a little more detail when we get into the suggested strategies and tactics. Seek race and ethnic equity in your staff, your representation and advertising, and all forms of community outreach. Now, you can also look at brands to make sure they're doing the same thing. Look at neighborhood and community race data. And if it skews one way, seriously consider adopting equity policies for your bike shop that align and balance your business with the world you want your business to represent going forward. And there are tactics that line up to do that. Consider outreach to underserved neighborhoods and communities that represent potential gains in your business as the result of providing products and services to new customers. There are several recent studies that show an enormous amount of potential, and there are several specialty bike retailers I'm aware of that are looking seriously at moving in to serve underserved communities and neighborhoods to take advantage of that potential. And align with not-for-profit bike shops in the underserved or ignored neighborhoods that can become not only sources of customers, but also sources of future employees. And there's more detail to that, but we just don't have time to cover it here. So these are the product categories, in addition to all cyclists, by the way, that are now covered in the research. Just came out day before yesterday in the brand study, which is the final piece of the supplier study. This was all inclusive in what the sponsors received, but there is an in-depth look at road cyclists, ages, of course, 18 plus, because this is an adult study, mountain cyclists, and e-bike cyclists, which becomes very interesting and important as we move forward, because this is a segment that everybody agrees is the segment of the future. And it's driving forward as we speak into 2022. Now, I have not gone into huge detail in each one of these because I just received the data to begin to work with day before yesterday, but by Friday of this week, there will be a V2 of the NBDA Bike Shop study and report that will include the product categories in detail. The road cyclist overview is over 60% of road cyclists are male. It's 63.3%. The mean average age, or the average age of a road cyclist, is 39. And half of all road cyclists are between the ages of 25 and 44, obviously spreading, as we showed you, across the millennial and the Gen X categories or generations. Now, this is both good and bad in the sense that you've got a huge representation or over-indexing of males. There aren't anywhere near the number of females that should be involved in this activity. And that spells opportunity, but it also goes to culture within bike shops and also among brands who have to think seriously about the importance that they're missing of the women's market. The mean household income of road cyclists is $99,000 per year, well above the national average we showed you of 60 some odd thousand per year. Also, from a educational standpoint, 61.4% of road cyclists have a college degree or higher, well above the national averages at about 33%. And the majority, 80.5% of road cyclists, are Caucasian. Now, the detail of race is included in the study. It will be in the V2 of the bike shop report that will again go to those that have purchased in the bike shop community and those that do purchase going forward after this week. But again, this is a huge opportunity within the road cycling community and also the marketing and selling of road bikes, new or used, into a broad range of the American population by race that are not now road cyclists. So for the supplier side, and what we'll be analyzing and putting into the dealer report is the supplier report contains 30 pages of data and information on road cyclists. Mountain cyclists. 58% of MTB riders are male, a little less representation than the road cyclists, but still over-indexed. The mean average or the average age is 37, the majority between 25 and 54, again, falling within millennials and Gen X. Mean household income of an MTB rider is $79,000 per year, not as high as road, still higher than the national. 45.2% of MTB riders have a college degree or higher. Again, nowhere near as high as the road rider, but above the national index. And the majority, 77.6%, are Caucasian, another opportunity. And the supplier report, again, these are each 30 pages of data and information. This will be summarized over the next couple of days for dealers and added as a V2 to the bicycle shop report from the NBDA. This is the most fascinating piece, is the e-bike cyclists. This is the only study I'm aware of that has looked at e-bike riders and gathered all of this information. In summary, 64% of e-bike cyclists are male. Again, way too high, creating there is an opportunity here, both from the standpoint of brand marketing and bike shop marketing. The mean age is 37, and over half, 63%, between the ages of 25 and 44, squarely falling in the sweet spot. The mean income is $106,000 a year. Now, that's not only good, it also means there's a huge opportunity coming up. 69.3% of e-bikers have at least a college education, and 78.3% of e-bike cyclists are Caucasian. Again, over-indexed in a direction that's good. We can hold on to them, but we also have great opportunity in all other ethnic groups. And again, a 60-page set of data and information available to suppliers in the 150 supplier report. All of this will be summarized and brought down to a digestible, manageable level for bike shops to be able to include in their planning and in their strategic planning going forward. So now we're in cyclist segmentation. And segmentation is important because what it allows you to do for both retailers and for the brands and suppliers is these segments have been broken into these clusters. The clusters now in turn have been looked at as cyclist segments. And while they're listed here as segment 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll show you what the detail is that the analysts in our group have put together in order to put the information relative to the riders over the last 2 years into formats where you could look at the attributes and begin to craft marketing and sales plans according to what the information that's been gathered allows us to do. And we start with enthusiasts and early adopters, as we've termed them. This is 10% of American cyclists, 10% of all those cyclists that are out there riding bikes and e-bikes. However, the percent of cyclists spend for enthusiasts and early adopters is 54%. They're described as affluent with high spending, cycling fanatics, or we would call them enthusiasts, high penetration of e-bikes, high use of IBDs, both to buy, to use their websites and for service. And they buy premium brands, as we have determined, or taught, we call them the higher end brands. Key demographics: average age 37, cycling frequency 22 times a month on average. The average cycling spend $4,500 per year. The average income $116,000 a year. Now, again, this is all good. It all represents opportunity. It all says that we got to look at these other segments as we go forward for what you can pull in and not only go after to gain business, but also supplement your business. The key market: premium brands, the IBD channel, they buy from bike shops. Messaging themes, they love technology. They're into customization. They like the environment and sustainability and things that they hear from the brands that are sold and the retailer being the brand, what the retailer's doing in this area. And they try new things. They're early adapters. Oh, I apologize. I jumped forward 2 here. Messaging channels, all social media, the IBD network, and cycling event broadcasts. This group has the highest percentage of participants in Tour de France broadcasts, in watching cycling on television, on participating in clubs, etc. So this is the core group. This represents where the money is in the business, but not necessarily the complete demographic sweet spot that you can take advantage of going forward. New wave and high frequency, percent of cyclists, 8%. Percent of cycling spend, 9%, low. These are young. These are younger people. Their average age is 38. They don't yet have the income, but they ride 23 times a month. Their average spend per year is $1,000, and their average income is $76,000, still above the national average. So this group, while they buy from IBDs and chain sporting goods, or Dick's would be the best example, do buy upper market. They are premium mid-market brands or buyers. They like commuting. Oh, sorry about that. They like commuting. They're interested in stress relief from cycling. They're interested in exercise from cycling, and they like speed and excitement. So it's a whole different mindset that you can target in social media, in your marketing, and also from the standpoint of training staff. And the messaging channels, definitely social media, definitely chain sporting goods, but the key to me is social media. how you reach this group on social media, how you attract them into your store. The diverse new cyclists, as we call them, 29% of all of the cyclists in the last 2 years, 13% of the spend, certainly much more attractive from that standpoint. Highest percentage of females we found in all of the segments. So that bears a lot of study. They're one of the younger groups. They're less affluent. They have a low cycling frequency, 13 times a month. The average spend is under $400. Their average income is $66,000, is close to national average. Mid to low end brands, mass merchant customers, and chain sporting goods customers. So this takes a lot more work from your standpoint in thinking about how you're going to approach them and attract them. And your messaging at this point, health media, certainly social media. And of course, what we're looking at here is their reach to the chain sporting goods and mass merchants. When we get into tactics for this particular segment, we also stress what you need to do to reach them on social media. Family cyclists, 29% of American cyclists, 16% of the spend. They have the most children in their household. They are affluent, average age 41, they skew older, 14 times a year for riding, 14 times a month for riding frequency, $502 average spend per year, incomes at $98,000, again, above the average. Your themes here, family exercise, getting out in nature, sightseeing, and again, online family websites is an excellent way to reach this group, along with kids TV and kids social media. The last group, senior exercise and fitness. And again, we go into detail in these segments within the NBDA Bike Shop report. Senior exercise and fitness, these are the older Americans, average age 60. They're the oldest group, 60% male, again, way too high from an index standpoint, representing opportunity, but they got the lowest spend. They spend about $305 on average per year. They ride 14 times a month. Average household incomes, $98,000, well above national average. They are low-end and traditional brand buyers. So, one of the things here is taking the media, in this case, health media, online senior websites, and making sure that you're using your social media to attract these customers. Now, why do you want to attract older people? While the spend is low, the average household income is high. So taking advantage of their interest in both comfort and fitness is a way to get them in the store. And once you capture them as customers, they become very loyal. I apologize for the speed. We're probably very tight on time, which I also apologize for. We got room for some questions. Wanted to cover briefly the education series again. This is the January 19th webinar, which I have screeched through. It is recorded, so it is available to you. We are doing another webinar that will be closed to the NBDA membership and the buyers of the research at the supply and the dealer level on January 26th. All start times are 1 p.m. Eastern. A third webinar also just for the buyers of the research study and for the NBDA membership, February 2nd. And then February 16th is a roundtable. I'll repeat, Keith Storey will be joining us, the primary researcher, the lead researcher. And we invite you to attend, buy the report, look at it, get your questions together, particularly for the retailers, and plan on attending the February 16th session at 1 p.m. Eastern, so that you can get your questions answered by a panel of experts that will also, if like this session, if they don't get to the question during the session, we'll definitely be able to follow up with an email or a phone call. So, in summary, in the time available, I gave you a brief introduction of the study itself, the methodology used. I dwelled on demographics, which I'm excited about. I hope you are too. We looked at the new product categories that we'll be expanding on, and you'll see more expansion of that in the next two webinars. as well as I said in the NBDA Bike Shop report that'll be available in its V2 this week, the latter part of this week. We looked at segmentation, which is extremely important. And again, it's covered in more detail in the reports. And then lastly, revisited the educational series, and we've got a little time for Q&A. Rochelle, do you have any questions?
We do. We're just going to jump right into them, if that's all right with you.
Oh, absolutely. Don't want to run out of time.
Perfect. The first one is about the screening of the survey respondents. They asked, was the survey instrument presented to respondents as one about bicycling, or did it start more general, thus assuring a sample representative of the total population?
That's a Keith Storey question, but from chatting with Keith and talking to him, I would say neither. The screener here was, did they ride a bicycle or e-bike in 2020, 2021? In other words, were they a cyclist? And then it went from there. So the screener was to find people that were cyclists.
Okay, perfect. Does the survey include all channels of purchase, including mass retail and sporting goods stores, or is it IBD only?
No, it's all channels, including online. And it did cover used and e-bike as well as the traditional categories.
All right. Does this data include at-home stationary bikes like Peloton?
No, we did not ask that question. We were looking at active cyclists, outdoor cyclists. So no, it does not cover indoor.
All right. Looks like one more question that's already in the chat. Would you mind going back to the graphic that had the schedule of the upcoming webinars on it?
If I can. No, I evidently can't. But I will read them because I've got them in front of me. The next one is January 26th. The one after that is February 2nd. The roundtable is February 16th. Those are all Wednesdays, I believe. They all start at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Perfect. That is all the questions that came through right now. So any further questions anybody has, please send them to info@nbda.com or to Jay's email up on the screen, and we will make sure to get those questions answered for you.
Thank you. And I apologize for speeding through this. I normally am a little more thoughtful and pace a little more, but we ended up at 12:58 by my watch. So we did not go over, which I think from our standpoint is important. We don't want to drag these things out too much, but we want them to be informative. We want to give information, and hopefully we've done that. And if you got more questions, let me know, and please contact the NBDA at nbda.com to buy your reports.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you everyone for attending today. Have a great afternoon.